In 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. You learned it in kindergarten. You repeated it in middle school. You probably still remember it right now, word for word. But here's the question no one ever asked you. How do you discover a place where 70 million people are already living? Think about that for a second. 70 million people. They had cities, they had governments, they had trade routes, calendars, architecture, philosophy, and medicine. They had been building civilizations for thousands of years before a single European ship appeared on the horizon. So how did we end up calling it a discovery? That's not a historical accident. That was a choice. A very deliberate, very calculated choice, made by powerful people who needed that story to be true. And today, we're going to trace exactly how that myth was created, who built it, who it served, and what it cost the people it erased. Let's start at the beginning, not 1492, earlier than that. For centuries, European powers had one massive problem. They wanted land. They wanted resources. They wanted trade routes and gold and power. But they also wanted to see themselves as civilized, Christian, moral people. And here's the thing about moral people. They can't just walk into someone else's home and take everything. They need a reason. So the Catholic Church gave them one. In 1452, 40 years before Columbus ever left Spain, Pope Nicholas V issued a document called the Dum Diversas. It authorized the Portuguese crown to conquer, colonize, and enslave non-Christian peoples. Then, in 1493, 1 year after Columbus landed, Pope Alexander VI went further. He drew a line down the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and divided the entire non-Christian world between Spain and Portugal. Just like that, on paper, with a pen. Two countries split a hemisphere they had never seen, filled with hundreds of millions of people they had never met. And the legal foundation for all of it was a simple, devastating idea. If the people living on a land are not Christian, that land is considered empty. Not their land, not anyone's land. Empty land. And empty land can be discovered. This became known as the Doctrine of Discovery, and it didn't stay in the 1400s. It traveled across the Atlantic. It shaped colonial law. It influenced American law. In fact, the United States Supreme Court cited the Doctrine of Discovery as recently as 1823 in a case called Johnson versus Mantosh to rule that Indigenous people could not hold legal title to their own land. A Pope's decree from the 1400s used in an American courtroom in the 1800s. That is how deep this myth runs. Now let's talk about the man at the center of it all, Christopher Columbus. October 12th, 1492. He lands in the Caribbean, probably on an island in the Bahamas, and he calls it a discovery. But here's what the story always leaves out. Columbus had no idea where he was. He thought he had sailed to Asia. He called the people he met Indians because he genuinely believed he was somewhere near India. He was wrong. Not slightly wrong, catastrophically, completely wrong. And he never figured it out. Columbus died in 1506, still believing he had reached the outer islands of Asia. The man the myth is built around didn't even know what he had found. It was actually an Italian explorer named Amerigo Vespucci who came after Columbus and first suggested, in writing, that these lands were not Asia at all. They were an entirely separate continent, a world the Europeans had no knowledge of. In 1507, a German cartographer named Martin Waldseemüller put that idea on a map. He called the continent America, after Vespucci. Not Columbus, Vespucci. So the continent is named after a different man. The discoverer didn't know where he was, and the people he discovered had been living there for over 15,000 years. And yet, Columbus is the hero of the story. Why? Because Columbus had something Vespucci didn't. He had Spain behind him. He had Queen Isabella. He had the church. He had an empire that needed his voyage to mean something, legally, religiously, and politically. Discovery wasn't just a word. It was a legal mechanism. If Columbus discovered it, Spain owned it. If Spain owned it, they could colonize it. If they could colonize it, they could extract its resources, enslave its people, and build an empire worth hundreds of billions in today's money. The myth of discovery was the paperwork for one of the largest land grabs in human history. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Columbus wasn't even the first European to reach the Americas. Around 1000 AD, nearly 500 years before Columbus, a Norse explorer named Leif Erikson established a settlement on the northeastern coast of North America, in present-day Newfoundland, Canada. The site is called L'Anse aux Meadows. Archaeologists confirmed it in the 1960s. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
This is not legend. This is not folklore. This is confirmed history, backed by physical evidence, recognized by the entire international academic community. Leif Erikson was in North America 500 years before Columbus. And yet, no one grows up learning about Leif Erikson Day. Why not? Because Erikson didn't have a pope backing him. He didn't have an empire waiting to use his voyage as legal justification for colonization. He came, he built a small settlement, and eventually he left. There was no political machine that needed his story. Columbus had the machine. Now let's talk about what Columbus actually found. Because this part of the story is almost never told the way it deserves to be. When Columbus arrived in 1492, the Americas were not a wilderness. They were not an empty frontier. They were home to some of the most sophisticated civilizations on Earth. The Aztec capital, Tenochtitlan, sat in the middle of a lake in what is now Mexico City. It had a population of over 200,000 people, making it larger than London, larger than Paris, larger than any city in Europe at the time. It had aqueducts carrying fresh water across the lake. It had massive markets where tens of thousands of people traded every single day. Spanish conquistadors who saw it for the first time wrote home saying they could hardly believe what they were seeing. They thought they were dreaming. To the south, the Inca Empire had built a road network stretching over 24,000 miles through some of the most brutal terrain on Earth. Across the Andes Mountains, through rainforests, along coastal deserts. For comparison, the famous Roman road system covered about 50,000 miles, but the Romans built over centuries with iron tools. The Inca built without iron, without the wheel, and without horses. The Maya, in Central America, had developed one of the most accurate astronomical calendars in human history. Their mathematics included the concept of zero, independently centuries before it reached Europe from India.
Their cities featured massive stone observatories aligned with remarkable precision to track the movements of Venus, the Sun, and the stars. And in North America, in the Mississippi Valley, stood the city of Cahokia. At its peak, around 1100 AD, Cahokia had a population of 20,000 people. It had a central mound larger at its base than the Great Pyramid of Giza. It had organized neighborhoods, ceremonial plazas, wooden stockade walls, and a sophisticated trade network reaching from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. These were not primitive people living in isolation. These were engineers, astronomers, architects, diplomats, farmers who had cultivated and domesticated dozens of crops: corn, potatoes, tomatoes, chocolate, peppers, squash, that would go on to transform the diet of the entire world. When Columbus arrived, he didn't find an empty land waiting to be discovered. He found a world. So how did we get from that to a story about one Italian sailor in 3 small ships? The myth-making happened in layers, over centuries, and it accelerated dramatically in the 1800s. In 1828, an American writer named Washington Irving published a biography of Columbus. But Irving wasn't writing history. He was writing drama. He invented scenes. He fabricated dialogue. He turned Columbus into a lone, heroic visionary standing against ignorant doubters, including the famous but completely false story that Columbus had to convince people the Earth wasn't flat. Educated Europeans had known the Earth was round since ancient Greece. That was never the debate. Irving made it up. But the book was a massive bestseller, and fiction, repeated often enough, becomes accepted as fact. Then came 1892, the 400th anniversary of Columbus's voyage. President Benjamin Harrison declared the first National Columbus Day celebration. But here's the context that's almost always missing from that story. The late 1800s were a period of intense, violent, anti-immigrant discrimination in America, particularly targeting Italian immigrants. In 1891, 11 Italian immigrants were lynched in New Orleans in one of the largest mass lynchings in American history. Italian Americans were facing discrimination, violence, and the constant message that they did not belong in this country. Columbus, an Italian navigator, became a symbol of Italian-American identity and pride. The Knights of Columbus, a Catholic fraternal organization, lobbied hard for the holiday. Celebrating Columbus was a way of saying, "We were here from the beginning. We belong here. This country is ours too." That is a deeply human impulse, and it makes complete sense in its historical context. But the symbol they chose, and the story that came with it, came at a cost. Because the story of Columbus as heroic discoverer could only work if the people he encountered were written out of the narrative entirely. And that's exactly what happened.
The cost of this myth was not abstract. It was paid in real lives across generations. The Doctrine of Discovery, the legal idea that Columbus's voyage had discovered empty land, became the foundation for centuries of indigenous dispossession in America. It justified the forced removal of native nations from their ancestral homelands. It justified the destruction of indigenous languages and cultures through the boarding school system, where native children were taken from their families, forbidden to speak their languages, stripped of their names, and punished for any expression of their identity.
It justified treaty after treaty that was signed and then broken. It justified the reduction of indigenous peoples from the original inhabitants of an entire continent to a small fraction of the population, living on a fraction of their original land. When a nation tells itself it discovered an empty land, it never has to honestly confront what it actually did to the people who were living there. The myth of discovery is not just a historical error, it is an ongoing evasion. But something is shifting. More than 20 US states and hundreds of cities have now replaced Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day. The Biden administration officially recognized Indigenous Peoples Day at the federal level in 2021. Statues of Columbus have been removed or relocated in cities across the country. School curricula are being revised. Museums are returning artifacts. Native voices are being included in conversations about history in ways they never were before. This is not about cancelling history. It is not about making anyone feel guilty for things that happened before they were born. It is about something much simpler. It is about telling the truth. Here is the truth. In 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed west from Spain and reached islands in the Caribbean. That happened. But he did not discover America. He could not have discovered a place where tens of millions of people were already living rich, complex, sophisticated lives. What he did was connect two worlds that had been separated for 15,000 years. That connection set off a chain of events, some extraordinary, many catastrophic, that shaped the modern world in ways we are still reckoning with today. That is a real story, a complicated story, a story worth telling honestly. The myth of discovery was created by people who needed empty land to justify what they were about to take. It was maintained by people who needed a founding story that didn't begin with conquest. And it was taught to generations of children because myths, once embedded in national identity, are very hard to let go of. But we are not required to keep repeating a story we know is false. The question was never whether Columbus sailed in 1492. The question is, what do we choose to do with the truth? There are 574 federally recognized indigenous nations in the United States today. They were never discovered. They were always here.